How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. I hope you are doing well. Round 5 of Norway Chess was quite crazy. Haven't made any long form videos since round 2, although we do have a couple of shorts out, and I appreciate all the views, likes, and things like that as it pertains to my shorts and things like that, and the new subscribers. Appreciate you all as well. Try and get 200, and then hopefully we can increase from there. But yeah, today was a crazy game, or today was a crazy day with some crazy games. All the classical games were drawn, which means that we had 3 Armageddons, hence the title. And honestly, like, I didn't watch the whole day or the whole broadcast, so I thought that the classical didn't really have much going on, and then the Armageddons were crazy. Well, the classicals were crazy as well, and those could be their own separate videos. Gukesh was completely winning. I think it was 2 bishops versus 2 knights. Hikaru was winning for a couple moves. I think Fabiano, it was mostly in the balance. Fabi versus Magnus, that was, but Fabi was like winning for a move. I think the middle game was pretty tense as well. So that could be its own. Obviously, don't really have the bandwidth to cover all of them, but I do want to cover all the Armageddon games from round 5. And also, this is worthy of noting, this is the final sort of round to where everyone has now played everyone. And so round 6, and we'll preview that in a second, but round 6 is going to be the round 1 matchups, which were Magnus versus Gukesh, and I think Fabi versus Hikaru, and then Wei Yi versus Arjun. So let's take a look at these games. These are all Armageddon games, so black has 7 minutes, white has 10 minutes, but to get the extra half point, white has to win, so black can draw. So just keep that in mind. So we'll start with Wei Yi as white versus Gukesh. Gukesh is kind of struggling a little bit, by the way. We'll get into that in a second. So Gukesh plays the Caro-Kann, a very popular opening among all rating levels, and Wei Yi plays what I think many people would consider kind of the lame approach, which is the exchange. It is considered lame. You know, you're not doing something like knight c3 or e5, really challenging your opponent, but at the same time, I do see a lot of these classical games with the top players. I see a lot of exchange Caro-Kanns, so if they're seeing this as the most solid way to go, then so be it. Also, white, well, I guess white actually has to win. So it is actually pretty interesting that Wei Yi felt the need to go for this. We see some moves being played, not going to hyper-analyze anything really, until this move knight g5. Now, knight g5 and queen h5. So this sort of sequence of moves. Now, if this is a game between sub 700s or something, I might be like, okay, you don't need to quite go for this. I mean, you're threatening mate in 1, but they could defend. But I think the way that Wei Yi, unintended pun, kind of set this up is actually pretty instructive. And I'd say at a certain level, it actually can be beneficial to set up these checkmate threats, even if they're obviously going to be seen, because it does induce some sort of weakness. Gukesh has to play h6, and then after h6, knight f3, there's now sort of a hook pawn that you can sort of like eye. And one kind of sample line, if black just dilly-dallies, plays a move like bishop d7, then you have this move g4. Let's give an explanation point. You have this move g4 with the idea being that if knight e7, you can sack the bishop with bishop takes h6. Oftentimes, that hook pawn can be a target for the bishop just sitting there on c1 to kind of strike at that pawn. The point is after takes, queen takes, there's a threat of mate with queen h7 or bishop h7 if, like, say, the rook moves. Because if you went queen h7, well, I guess that would be mate eventually after knight g5, apparently. But the cleaner way would be... actually not, because bishop... I was wanting to go here. Does that work? Check. No, it does. King g8, queen h7, and checkmate. Yeah, I just kind of blanked out for a little bit. But the point being that... the whole queen h5 and knight g5 maneuver isn't just to like threaten mate and hope that the world champion doesn't see it, but you're trying to induce a weakness. So h6, and Gukesh played g6, which now once again there is a threat, so he has to deal with it. He went h5, knight e5, and here Gukesh played bishop takes e5, which is, you know, I guess the incorrect approach, but honestly, like, what are you supposed to do? Like, he's supposed to just kind of suck it up, I guess, and leave the knight on e5. One thing I will mention, just because it's pretty cool, sometimes you look at the computer and it just spits out these insane lines and you just have to show it. I was kind of wondering, like, I mean, his best move is King G7, or one of the best moves, and I was kind of wondering, like, does he have to go F6 and try to kick the knight out? My suspicion was that it doesn't work, and it doesn't. And I'll kind of demonstrate why. It's actually quite instructive, because let's just say white just does a waiting move, like A4. If F6 is on the board, I believe if the knight retreats, then black's actually doing very well, because they have kind of this cluster of pawns. You could break with E5 or something like that, and it's really good for you. But here, white has the knight sacrifice. Knight takes G6. And after king takes G6, white's only winning move, G4. And what's even crazier is after H takes, my instinct, I assumed it was like this fancy move Queen H6 because the knight is pinned. And that's a good move, but the forced mate in this position is actually to take the knight, because if E takes, now you go Queen H6, and then Queen H7 is mate. You see the king is just decimated. But what I thought was quite interesting was after bishop takes F5, if king takes F5, you just have mate with Queen H7. You actually have multiple mate in ones. Queen D3 is mate in one, utilizing both diagonals with the queen and the bishop. Queen H7 is mate in one, again, utilizing the diagonals. And I said Queen D3, right? Yeah, Queen H5 is the other mate in one. My favorite is Queen H7 because you kind of utilize both diagonals from like opposite sides, from opposite ends of the board, so it's pretty nice. But anyway, so after knight E5, black's apparently just supposed to go like King G7 and just kind of let the knight sit there. But he felt the need to take, and then after F6, Wei Yi took the knight and played this move Queen G3, eyeing the G6 pawn. Black played King H7, and then the dust kind of settled, and white's just doing really well, even with a queen trade. The problem is, like, you have a weakness. White has some active pieces. The rook kind of dominates the open file, and it's really hard for Gukesh to sort of maneuver. So we see him try his best, although keep in mind, Wei Yi does have to win, so he can't afford to just trade all the pieces and draw. So eventually did dwindle down to an endgame. Wei Yi took the center pawn, and took another pawn, and eventually they got into an endgame where, I'm sorry, this is not the most instructive, I'm just trying to like kind of get it to its sort of like, basically you have an opposite color bishop ending, which oftentimes has the stigma that's like drawish, but given that this king is so exposed, the bishop's very active, the rook is active, and there's a weakness that this bishop is kind of babysitting, it is, and also the time situation, it's not, considered a draw necessarily. So black played King F7, so some more maneuvering happened, and eventually white found this, black played G5, and white found this cool move H4. The idea just being kind of like crack open at this, and if G takes, which is what happened in the game, king takes, and you have a new target. So eventually, white is just completely winning here. I think partly because this king is exposed. You actually have some mate ideas, or at least just ideas to kind of perturb the king. Rook E5, King F4. You can't really go King F6. Well, I mean, you can, but you just kind of open up a Pandora's box, right? So King F4, and this king is almost mated. Luckily, I guess it's not, but here I think it's kind of the climax after Rook F6. The king has nowhere to go. Bishop F5. Then after G3 check, which removes the defender of the bishop, Gukesh resigned the game. So, what really happened in this game? I think it's really hard to tell. I think Wei Yi had sort of a nice maneuver with his queen and knight and kind of utilizing the weaknesses that Gukesh made. And I guess after knight E5, he just had the incorrect approach with taking the knight. And he should have just been more patient. Didn't really do a deep dive as to how exactly, he lost essentially, but it just seems like Wei Yi got a really good position, some active pieces. Gukesh had some weaknesses, and he just couldn't really overcome it. So anyway, so Gukesh lost. Well, he lost the Armageddon, and I don't know, Gukesh, since becoming world champion, I'd have to look at the numbers, the results to actually give you a definitive conclusion, but it does seem like he's struggling I do know there's that freestyle event where he did really poorly. And I know some people, like some pundits, commentators were saying like, oh, it's freestyle, so whatever. But it's still, it's not nothing. There was another event. Was it the Grand Chess Tour where he didn't do that great? I'm not sure. I mean, he doesn't have to get first place in every single tournament. Like, he's clearly not like the dominant world champion that like Bobby Fischer, Magnus, Garry Kasparov were. And I've been kind of hoping that he could develop into that to where once Magnus sort of retires or like, falls off, washed or whatever, that Gukesh could kind of be that like next dominant force in the chess world. But at this point, you just don't know. It seems like the 2-3 best players in the world are like Magnus, Hikaru, and maybe Fabiano. Unless I'm missing someone really obvious. I mean, Ali Reza maybe, but I don't know. You just don't know. Like, just my whole career, my whole chess career, if you can even call it that, my whole time playing chess, Magnus was kind of the dominant dog. And like, I've actually never known a chess world where Magnus was not the world number one, and classical that is. So I've always been wondering who is going to kind of be that dominant force in the chess world after Magnus. And he may have another 5-10 years of just sheer dominance. You never know. But I think for a while we thought it was like Ali Reza, and he's still up there. He's one of the best players in the world, clearly. Gukesh, Ding became world champion for a second, but that obviously crashed and burned. So, Fabiano we thought could be it, but I think Fabiano's the type of player, like, if he just wasn't in Magnus's generation, he would probably be multi-time world champion. So, really interesting topic, probably a future video as well, just kind of like what happened to Gukesh and like who's kind of be that placeholder. Maybe it'll just kind of be one of those like, just like it's like it's anyone's game at this point. Like if Magnus were to just retire, then like, well, I guess he kind of did retire from the world championship, didn't he? So it was Ding, now it's Gukesh, and then dude, the candidates is going to be so intriguing. I mean, Fabi has a spot, Hikaru probably has a spot if he can maintain his rating, and so who's going to come out? Ali Reza? I don't know. So anyway, on to a rematch of a world championship from 2018. So that was 7 years ago. That's crazy. And I remember it like it was yesterday. Well, not really, but Fabiano versus Magnus, always a classic. It was an Italian. Not going to talk about too much about the opening, but this kind of setup where Black just plays like, just kind of plays like this, plays like an h6, a6, and puts the bishop on a7 is always like pretty solid. Knight bd2, b4, knight d8, and really I didn't have any I mean, I actually did, want to mention that this maneuver is actually like pretty interesting, where you just plop the knight on d8, go to e6, f4, and oftentimes in these Italians, if you can get a knight to the f4 square, then it's really, really good. You like complement with the knight, maybe like g5, stuff like that. It's really interesting stuff. Bishop on a7 kind of contributes as well. So we got that. Fabiano played rook e1, and I think the first kind of moment of intrigue, at least from my kind of quick look at this, was sort of this moment where Fabiano allowed Magnus to win a pawn with bishop takes f3 and then takes d4 and bishop takes d4. So to the casual observer, it looks like, oh, he just dropped a center pawn. He messed up. Maybe he didn't realize that he doubled his pawns, and like he has dropped a center pawn. How could he? Well, obviously these are, this is world champion versus world championship contender, so it is probably pretty clear as day that that was not just some oversight by Fabiano. And I think, because rook a d1 is, I believe, the best move in this position, and Magnus actually here found the best move, which is knight e5, but it's not just clear as apples because you can't really move the bishop. I guess bishop e5 is a move. I guess that's an option I didn't really consider, but kind of the point I was making is that if bishop a7, because I think oftentimes when you win a pawn, you sort of want to do that where you just take the pawn, then you go back to where you were like nothing happened. But you can't tactically go bishop a7 because of a pretty cool move, actually, sequence of moves that white has. So if you want to pause just for a brief second, white to play and win your pawn back. Might be win your pawn back and then some, I'm not sure. But the move in this position, a little bit out of nowhere, bishop takes a6. The idea being that if b takes a6, now the rook is opened, so you have this move pawn to e5, attacking the knight and the rook. One other thing I want to mention is that if black plays the move bishop b6, the idea being that this wouldn't be open, because after bishop takes, there'd be rook takes. White can just go a5, force the bishop to a7, and then this is just a worse version for black. So, anywho, that may have been Fabiano's justification. Magnus found knight e5, which is a really good move, queen b3, bishop a7, and knight e3, bishop takes e3, rook takes e3, and here, so you can kind of see, like, Fabiano's still down a pawn, but it is in the balance. There's some tension here, and Magnus messes up by going knight h5. Now, knight h5, you have to find the following sequence, which, again, it's easy to say, oh, computer lines, but I think at that level, the following is very findable. At the very least, you can play it off intuition, which is to go bishop takes e5. If queen takes, you hang the f7 pawn, and the f7 pawn is important here, so just pay attention. D takes, and the very natural move, rook e d3, and you are trying to sort of just invade with like rook d7, and of course you have a bishop takes f7 idea in the balance as well. And if Magnus just plays, sorry, there's something, I might have been thinking of something else actually. Anyway, but yeah, this is just completely dominating. Black can just castle. Black castles, rook d7, and then you're probably gonna win at least a pawn. See, I thought there was some tactic with like bishop takes f7, but it doesn't make sense to go rook d8 because you just lose material. Maybe I was thinking, I watched the commentary, which is why, maybe like knight f4, bishop takes f7. Oh, that's it, I think. Bishop takes f7, king cannot take because of the queen, and if queen takes, you go rook d8. And you win the queen because if rook takes, if king takes, you take the queen, and if king e7, you go rook d7 check, and this is just a very classic tactic. So anyway, Fabiano missed all that and played bishop e2, which honestly I think is a little bit inexplicable. Like, at the very least, can't you just go bishop takes and rook d3, like, off intuition? And, like, I don't know, maybe he thought he had to win, so he didn't want to trade pieces, but that still got to be a beautiful position. Maybe he missed something in his calculation. I'm not exactly sure. It would be interesting if he did, like, a post-game interview, what his thoughts were. But bishop e2 anyways on the board, knight takes, h takes, and Magnus castles, and Fabiano tries to extend some with f4, bishop f3, but eventually Magnus just gets a good position, which just sometimes happens, and just like that, he just takes this pawn because the rook is now under attack, and yeah, Magnus is just up a pawn, now up 2 pawns, 3 pawns, and doing really, really well, and didn't really take him long to just convert, but again, Magnus only needs a draw, but he goes for the win and eventually gets it done. So that was a pretty interesting game where I think Fabiano might have had some chances in the classical game as well, but didn't get that done. So now we are on to the third game between Hikaru Nakamura and Arjun Erigaisi. Yeah, this game was absolutely crazy. I made a short about it, so if you're interested, feel free to check it out. Arjun plays knight f3, c4, and just transposes it to a queen's gambit declined. Hikaru played knight f6, and opening not of utmost importance as far as the context of the game. I think the first interesting moment is here when after knight a4, Hikaru played bishop c6. Now, it's a mistake, not really for the reason you think. Arjun played the natural move, which is knight takes b6, which is still fine, but it turns out you can defend, even though it does look like a blatant fork. The problem is you're hanging your bishop, and then at the end of the line, your knight gets trapped. But the way for Arjun to sort of like get a bigger advantage is actually just to like, it's kind of the sequence of moves you wouldn't really think about, but it makes a lot of sense. It's just takes, and then just go knight c3. And you just have a lot of pressure on the d5 pawn. In fact, too much pressure because there's only 1 defender, 3 attackers. If you go d4, then you're going to lose that pawn anyway. So after bishop c6, Arjun didn't go for that. He played knight takes b6. And the problem is he lost his piece, but after queen c7, the knight was protected by the queen, but the knight's going to get taken. So it does turn out that Arjun is only up 1 point of material. He has an extra minor piece. Well, he has 2 minor pieces basically for a rook and a pawn, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But I do want you to see this kind of next sequence of moves by Hikaru. It's actually pretty instructive. He plays a4, which is a move I really like. In fact, I'll give an exclamation point. He plays a4 because he has this like sort of like pawn structure. If he can play b4 and really solidify this passed pawn, then he's probably close to winning, I would imagine. Like if he just plays a random move, b4, something like this. I mean, computer's not all that convinced, but this would be the type of thing that you want if you're Arjun. But Hikaru shuts it all out, plays a4, and then plays bishop c4. And suddenly this passed pawn is more of a weakness than an asset. It's not really supported by the rook anymore. Obviously, a pawn can never support it because of the mandatory en passant, right? I'm not saying that ironically here. It would be mandatory if that were to happen. That's the reason why a4 is so good, is because you clamp these 2 pawns with only 1 pawn. So eventually, Arjun pushes the pawn, but Hikaru just maneuvers the knight to e7, and the pawn is going to get taken. And suddenly, Hikaru's just doing really good. Even though he's like down in exchange, he has an extra pawn. He's about to get another pawn, and yeah, his bishop's really strong. His knights are gonna get in, and he's gonna get the pawn back. And yeah, knight f5, knight e7. And so Hikaru here should have played, I mean, it's saying rook c7, rook f8, like a waiting move or something like that. Knight e7 is actually kind of an elementary blunder, which Arjun missed. After knight e7, queen e7, white to play and win a pawn. I'll give you a few seconds. In this position, you gotta realize this pin, so rook takes d5 would just be a clean win of a pawn. And then at that point, it is Arjun's game to lose. I mean, what's the technical phrase? I mean, it's his to win, I guess. You know, he's the one who has to fight for the win now. Well, he does have to fight for the win regardless, but since he is white and he needs to win to get the extra half point. So yeah, it does look like Hikaru is winning. It looks like he's doing his thing. He's getting his rook to g6. He did some dancing around here, then put the rook on g6. Knight's well positioned. He's going to get the queen in. Threatening checkmate. Queen f3 is forced. Was it forced? I mean, I guess he could go queen g4, but queen f3 eyeing the or protecting the g2 square. Bishop b3, check. He doesn't care. He goes king h7. Arjun plays h4, likely out of desperation. Hikaru plays queen takes h4. After queen takes f7, this is kind of his Hail Mary. It's like he chucked the h-pawn, he grabs the f-pawn, and then it's like, I have a checkmate threat, but black is completely winning after only one sequence of moves. And I think, again, this is pretty basic. I'm not sure why Hikaru missed it. He has to go rook takes g2. And it's not some fancy checkmate, like you're going to go here and then yada, 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 get checkmate. It is, well, you do go queen g4, but it's just to win the rook. You sack the rook, and then you go queen g4, and you just win your rook back. After, king h2 or something, queen takes c8. Black is winning because, amazingly, white does not have any checks. This rook, like, what are you doing? Like, it's literally just can't. I mean, maybe it could contribute, I guess, but black's just gonna play like queen c2 and stuff like that before you know it. And this knight's dominant, this bishop is well solidified. It is just a really good. I'm not just saying that because the computer says it. Like I even think like queen g4, just going back, and then like knight g5, knight f3 could be a solution. But black would be winning here. So I haven't watched Hikaru's sort of like recap video, so I would be interested to see why he didn't play it. Maybe it was just time pressure, maybe he just missed it. I do think these days, Hikaru, I know it's kind of ironic that he talked about retirement and then he like won the American Cup and he's doing really, really well, got chess.com Blitz Peak or something like that. But I do notice in his recaps that Hikaru just misses things more. He's clearly getting older. He's like 36, 37, something like that. And, there is the whole, like, if he doesn't do well, he's going to retire, which I don't know. Like, I think in the classical, he's doing okay. He's just losing a couple of Armageddon games. He shouldn't. So I don't know. I mean, we still got the whole half of the tournament to go. Don't forget, this is a very, very strong field. So, and I think Hikaru's in third place. So he's not doing bad, I don't think. But we'll see. Maybe based off his standards, he's, it's time to retire. But hopefully not. So Hikaru blundered by playing rook f6. He missed rook takes g2. And then after queen g8, forcing the king to the g6 square. Maybe he was banking on this pressure and thought that was good enough. That would suffice. But Arjun finds the only move, g3. And, Hikaru has nothing. If he tries knight takes g3, well, knight takes g3, actually, it's pinned. So, yeah, ignore that I said that. But, yeah, after g3, queen g4, Arjun finds the move rook c7. And it is just game over, Red Rover, as they say. Actually, I don't know who says that. I think Danny Wrench said that 10 years ago. King h5, rook takes g7. Queen f7, pinning the rook. And Arjun just has to find the win here, which he does, which is rook takes g6, rook takes g6, g4. And the idea is that the king has to hold on to the queen. And if king g5, f4 would end the game. And so like that, Hikaru lost. The Armageddon game, that is. Now, let's take a quick look at the standings. And actually, I'm kind of doing this a little bit impromptu. I'm going to assume, that I can go to, let's go to this scene. There we go. So, after 5 rounds, this is the halfway point. Unsurprisingly, you have Magnus Carlsen in first place. Even though he doesn't play as much classical anymore, he's no longer world champion. He is still the best player in the world and probably will be for a while, so he is in first place. You have Fabiano at second, Hikaru at third, which I don't think in itself is that bad at all, and he still has the rest of the tournament sort of catch up. And then you got Arjun at fourth, Wei Yi and Gukesh tied for last. So, and also tomorrow you have Magnus versus Gukesh, kind of the highly anticipated round 1 matchup. Basically, the defending world champion versus the, chess goat. Hikaru versus Fabiano, which is always a classic, and Arjun versus Wei Yi. So, we'll see how these games go. I hope that you enjoyed this video and are enjoying these videos, some of the longer recaps, the shorts and things like that. As always, let me know sort of what you think and if there are any areas that I can improve as a content creator. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching and have a great rest of your weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.